Tipping Spheres with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with remarkable guests. So whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today we're thrilled to welcome John Bicknell. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm looking forward to being on Tipping Spears.
I'll give the kind of the consolidated bio to introduce you to the audience. So John is the CEO and founder of More Cowbell Unlimited, a national security thought leader and passionate analytics visionary. He has written extensively on national security matters related to information warfare, critical infrastructure defense, and space situational awareness. Before retiring from the United States Marine Corps in 2010 as a lieutenant colonel, John served worldwide, most notably in Afghanistan and in the Pentagon. He led enterprise-level process-intensive human resource supply chain projects designed to discover inefficiencies, architect solution, and repurpose manpower savings. In his corporate career, he operationalized an analytics center of excellence for a large education technology firm, among other achievements. He is also the vice president for the Information Professionals Association and host of the Cognitive Crucible podcast. His master's degree from the Naval Postgraduate School emphasizes econometrics and operations research. John currently lives with his family in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. So welcome to Tipping Spears, John. I was so excited to have you on here. Just one thing that's always impressed me about your career is kind of your success in so many different sectors, kind of staying kind of true to the mission, and just excited to learn more about you and how you kind of went along in that journey.
Yeah, well, again, Hannah, thank you so much for having me onto the forum. And man, it's strange, I must say, hearing my bio read out loud. I need to trim that down a little bit.
You have a lot of achievements. That is so, no, that's great. So can you tell us where your story began? So before all these achievements, where were you? How did you get
Yep.
inspired to go this direction?
Yeah, well, so I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, with a loving family, and I've got a brother as well. And my mother and my brother still live in Houston. But it's so both sides of my family, both my mother's side and my father's side, have a military heritage. My mother's, and so I heard about military related uh, exploits and stories, and just like a general patriotic theme, throughout my childhood. That was kind of like in the background all the time. My mother's family was Army, and my father's family, my grandfather was a World War II war correspondent, and then my dad was in the Navy. So, had a bunch of military, infused into my upbringing. So, grew up in Houston. I went to school in Nashville, Tennessee, at Vanderbilt University, and studied civil engineering at Vanderbilt. And I was also in ROTC, Naval ROTC. And as mentioned, I went into the Marines after college, um, partially because I think I was influenced again by my family and the military heritage of my family to go into the military following college. But um, uh, truth be told, and there's a lot of people that I've come across who can relate to this, is that I joining the military was also a way for me to avoid having to make some other kind of a career decision. Like I said, I studied civil engineering, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go into civil engineering following college. So joining the military was a way to kind of postpone that kind of a career choice. And so I stayed in the Marines for 20 years before deciding what I wanted to do when I, you know, grew up, as they say.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you got to see a lot of things in the Marine Corps and kind of maybe that helped kind of inspire some interest or introduce you to other interests as you went through that.
It certainly did. You know, when I was go in college, uh, you know, I've got this you know, two parts of me. I'm on one hand, I tend to be a, you know, fun-loving guy. I've got a good sense of humor. Uh, uh, but I also have a really serious and earnest side of me as well. And so I like to do important work, but I also like to have a good time doing it. And those two parts of me can be a little off-putting isn't the right word, but uh, I don't know. So sometimes they don't always mesh together just right. But in college, for example, um, I was not a serious student. I did not have a serious college career. In fact, I would say, quite frankly, that I basically squandered my college opportunity. I graduated, etc., but I really did not um, avail myself of the resources that were available to me in college. Uh, uh, but I say that in answer to your question, it's like when I was in the Marines, I was an administrative officer in the Marines, and I served a couple of deployments with the 24th MEU, the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. This was in the mid 1990s, mid to late 1990s, by the way. And so we did two deployments to the Mediterranean, and it was during peacetime, except for when we were in the Adriatic Sea, just basically dwelling in the Adriatic Sea while the Bosnia and Herzegovina, you know, conflict was ongoing, and we did a little bit of support there, but nothing significant. So it was basically peacetime deployments. But when I completed those operational tours, I went to the Naval Postgraduate School, as you mentioned in my bio, and for some reason, between being an unserious student in ROTC in college, and I graduated in 1990, to going to the Naval Postgraduate School in 1998 after having some real world experience, some switch flipped for me, and I was really ready to, you know, get serious about you know, doing something, you know, initially for national security, but ultimately, you know, having an experience that would carry through right through to what I'm doing today as well. And I really discovered that I have a passion for innovation, analytics, and problem solving. And that really started with that master's experience at the Naval Postgraduate School. So um, I'm not sure whether I completely addressed your. That's another one a frustration people have with me is that sometimes I tend to, you know, drift off course a little bit while talking about stuff. But then again, that's maybe one of my endearing qualities as well.
There you go. All those golden nuggets of wisdom
Yes, that's
coming
right.
out of your
Yeah,
rabbit trails.
they could come cascading out at any time, or not. Yeah,
Well, no, it's
right.
really interesting, John, to hear kind of the whole picture as
Yeah,
opposed to, the
yeah,
accolades that you can kind of see as you're talking.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
see where the seeds were planted and it,
Well,
it all
yeah,
puts
yeah,
together.
yeah. You know, there's one one of the people who not a family member who
Mhm.
inspired me was a guy. His name was Joseph Campbell, and
Okay.
he was a comparative religion scholar in the mid 1900s, and he died, I think, in the late 1980s or something like that. But he famously wrote a book that was called uh, I should know this. It's either called A Hero's Journey or it's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's
Okay.
one of the other. Very famous stuff, right? But one of the things that he said that really resonated with me is that when you get to be a certain age, and I'm in my late 50s now, I'm
Mhm.
57, so I'm not old, but I'm also not young either. But when you get to a certain age and you look back over, you gaze back over your life and see what you've done and what life has done to you, etc. But there's there seems to be a little bit of a plot to it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm the beneficiary of being intimately involved with my life because it's my life, right? But yeah, but like you said, going from being a young kid in Houston and the kinds of things I liked then and the kinds of things I did, I was in the Boy Scouts and then I was in the Marines and I, studied something technical in college and now I still like doing technical. I mean, there seems to be some sort of a authorship to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't see the themes when
Hmm.
you're the one in the moment, right? It's
Yeah.
like you look back and you're like, "Oh, this wasn't just totally chaotically crazy. There was some
Right.
purpose, some themes through it."
Right. It's like the fog of war exists in the present.
Yeah.
But when I look back at the past, there's no fog.
Interesting.
Because the story's already been told, the decisions have been made, right or wrong, good or bad, but the fog is not present when the fog doesn't appear to have been there when in fact it certainly was. Like right now, I've got lots of decisions to make and choices, and the future is as uncertain
Mhm.
today as it always has been for me. But once decisions have been made, the fog tends to clear away, and the the results of the choices are clear. There's this poem that's one of my favorite poems. I'll have to get it for you. It's by a guy named Antonio Machado. I believe that's it, but it's called uh, I believe it's called The Wanderer or something like that. Here I am talking about one of my
Yeah.
favorite poems, and I can't remember the poet nor the name of it. But he talks about how making choices and sailing a ship on a sea. It's like the way forward is uncertain, but when you look back, all you can see is the wake, and it's a lot clearer the choices that you've made. So,
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put that. I think it's a great description. All too often, people think of kind of career development as checklist, checklist, checklist. Let me mark these things off. But your career just really embodies a journey, and I love how the kind of it connects together. Can
yeah, for sure.
can you tell us a little bit about kind of your experiences or transition from, the military into the corporate and entrepreneurial space in business?
Yeah, for sure. So I retired from the Marines in 2010, and I my family and I we made a very conscious choice to make that transition a hard transition.
Mhm.
And by that I mean like a crisp transition. I personally wanted to avoid the temptation of retiring one day and then 2 weeks later showing back up in the same office with a business suit on as Mr. Bicknell, doing consulting for the same kinds of things which I had been doing previously, right? I wanted to avoid that. And so as part of that desire, we moved to the Pacific Northwest. One, we were enchanted by the Pacific Northwest on a visit here, so we thought, hey, this would be great to move here, and it's beautiful. If for those in your audience who have never visited the Pacific Northwest before, except for maybe just like a layover at the Seattle airport or something like that, if you've never spent like 2 weeks in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm talking about anywhere from like say north of San Francisco
Mhm.
all the way up to Vancouver, BC, or to Victoria, BC, that area. It's a big area, right? But the United States is big enough where you can really chunk it up into some major geographies, right? And the Pacific Northwest is kind of its own thing, right? And so
Mhm.
it really is something to behold if you haven't, taken a trip out here. I mean, there's like snow-capped volcanoes, like from where I am right now, and I'm actually in Columbia City, Oregon. But from where I am right now, I can see Mount Adams, which is a 12,000 foot volcano, Mount Hood, which is an 11,000 foot volcano, and believe it or not, where I am, 100 miles away, on a really clear day, I can also see Mount Jefferson, which is
Wow.
another 11,000 foot volcano approximately. But, snow-capped volcanoes exist in the lower 48 states, is my point, right? And so you should really come and visit the Pacific Northwest. Anyway, that was one of my digressions, Hannah, as you no doubt are thinking to yourself, this guy is not sticking to the point. But anyway, we made a decision to do something really different, and so
Mhm.
I got out of the Marines and had a couple of corporate jobs in order to resist the temptation of going into the government contracting world. And unsurprisingly, they were like analytics related jobs. I did human resources analytics, and I actually worked with a financial analytics startup outfit in Portland for a little while as well. I worked for ACT, the assessment company,
Yeah.
doing analytics with ACT out of Iowa City, Iowa. I was a remote employee with ACT. That was a fantastic experience. But my wife, she has her own business doing consulting for female entrepreneurs, and I worked in my wife's business as well for a while, doing some technology back end stuff. All of this stuff kind of combined to helping to prep me for my own entrepreneurial journey, and I really do have to thank my wife for urging me to start my own business. I probably would not have done so were it not for her. First of all, she demonstrated to me that, uh, you know, being a successful entrepreneur takes hard work, but it's definitely doable as well. But like I said, she's the one that urged me to start my own business, which is More Cowbell Unlimited. And I'd be happy to tell you more about what we're doing, but we're working with the Army on some information operations related projects right now, and a couple of other projects too. But anyway, I'm hoping that helps answer your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, John. So we connected through your work with the nonprofit
Yep,
Information
yep,
Professionals Association. Can you
that's right.
tell the audience a little bit about y'all's mission, kind of what y'all do and your involvement there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Hannah's talking about the Information Professionals Association, and anybody that wants to check it out, I encourage you to do so. It's information-professionals.org. And please consider joining and supporting our mission. It's a very inexpensive to join. Your membership fee, $35 a year, goes directly to our all volunteer organization to help support our mission. But we're all about bringing together experts in cognitive security and information operations in order to foment hard and soft power solutions against what we think of as our generational challenge, and that is cognitive security. It's figuring out collectively at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels, but also at societal levels as well, community and cultural levels. How do we protect ourselves cognitively from the onslaught of information that we are living and breathing and consuming every day? And the information problem is qualitatively and quantitatively different than it has ever been. As you mentioned, Hannah, I'm not only the vice president of IPA in charge of membership, which is why I gave the membership pitch just a moment ago. But I also host the Cognitive Crucible podcast, and we're recording this, Hannah, on the 16th of April of 2025. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to come out, but probably by the time this comes out, there's an upcoming episode with a gentleman from Norway, Paul Buvarp, and in that episode, we start really interesting. We start unpacking what he calls the demand side of information. So often people talk up, and so the information problem is so multifaceted, right?
Mhm.
It's not just like, here, slap a super quick definition on top of it, and there you go, right? There are so many different perspectives. It's like the parable of the three blind men and the elephant, right? You've got
Mm.
three different people. One is touching the
Oh,
trunk
touching.
a- and
Yeah.
and describes it as like a snake. What is it I'm touching
Mhm.
here? I'm touching a snake. Another is touching one of the legs. It's like, what am I touching? It feels like a tree. And the other person is touching the tail of the elephant. It's like, this feels like a rope, right? What
Mhm.
is it, right? And it's such a big problem that so many different experts and practitioners have different ways of describing the problem. And so he was describing the demand side of the information challenge. It's so many people talk about the supply side, like, well, what is
Mhm.
Russia? What is China doing to us, and Iran and other bad actors, and even actors within the homeland? They're pushing deliberate
Mhm.
mis and disinformation
Mhm.
for purposes which are not good.
Yeah.
But there's also demand side challenge to it all as well, and that humans are constantly seeking new information.
Mhm.
Humans like
Mhm.
receiving information that validates their intuitions or their biases, right?
Mhm.
People like receiving information which is a mixture of entertainment, but also, serious content, and all of this gamification, all of this stuff is playing right into some of the challenges that we're having on the demand side of the information problem. So anyway, that episode is going to be coming out here relatively soon. And so if anybody wants a good starter episode for the Cognitive Crucible, I would recommend that one.
Yeah, no, thanks for providing that description, John. I think at least what I hear in terms of mis and dis, the focus tends to be people are like, let's shut it off. Let's stop the supply. Is there an
Hmm.
ad blocker equivalent
Yep.
we can
Yep.
just put? And the demand side of it, why we're craving this,
Hmm.
what this is fixing in our own kind of cognitive
Yep.
space needs is just really not talked about. So I'm so excited
Yep.
that
Yep.
y'all are discussing that and kind of bringing more awareness to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess I'm super excited about this episode to come out because I met this fellow Paul at a conference a month ago or thereabouts, and he really blew me away. And I don't want to recap the entire episode because I could just go on and on. But
Yeah.
he really blew me away with thinking about social media as an environment or a
Mm-hmm.
system where the truth is less common. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not that the truth doesn't exist on social media or people don't say truthful things, but it is more likely within a social media context for people to lie and
Mm-hmm.
misrepresent than it
Mm-hmm.
is in say face-to-face discussions.
Yeah.
So like right now, you and I, Hannah, we're having, let's just call it a face-to-face discussion, even though there is some distance there, right? But I in one-on-one interactions or small group
Mm-hmm.
interactions, the good faith discussion
Mm-hmm.
is more an expectation and it's more uh, if I were to lie to you, or if I were to be unserious, or if
Mm-hmm.
I were, there would be a cost to me reputationally,
Yeah.
not just with you, but perhaps with your audience and others. And so when you're interacting with people one on one, there is a major cost to being a bad actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you got found out, it would not be good for whatever circle you're living in. That's not true on social media, right? People there's an anonymity and distance factor on social media, which just makes the ability to lie and misrepresent and distort a lot more of a natural thing because there's very little cost to doing so. And so um, uh, uh, it got me thinking about social media as social media is as different from real world, one-on-one discussions. It's as different as like a forest is compared to a beach, or from like outer space compared to the real world. They are so different that you would be foolish to like dress for real life engagement on social media because they're so different. And so we talk about that kind of stuff in the podcast episode as well.
Yeah, well, such a timely topic. I
Hmm.
found that, it's something that basically anyone with an internet connection is kind of impacted by, but
Hmm.
they're not aware. It's not like stuff
Right.
happening over there in a war zone, separate from them.
Well, I think it gets to that expectations, right?
Yeah,
If I get on, I'm showing my age here, right? If I get on the Facebook,
the
uh,
Facebook.
yeah, if I get on the Facebook and I start, interacting on the Facebook, I'm sitting in my living room, and it doesn't feel any different to me because
Mhm.
I'm still in my normal setting, but I'm
Mhm.
interacting in a foreign environment, which is like I might as well be like on the moon compared to
Yeah.
be sitting in my living room. And people, I think, should have that kind of a mindset shift when they are engaging on social media. It's like, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore,
Yeah.
right? And if people just have that kind of a mindset shift when they're engaging on whatever social media or online or VR or AR,
Mhm.
whatever, however they're engaging, if they just put it like what's the word? Just put on a different uniform.
Yeah.
Dress differently than
Yeah.
if you would if you were engaging across the kitchen table from somebody.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight into how our, physical environment can alter even how we approach this online communication.
Yes, that's very, very well said, Hannah. I have a knack for being able to take 5 minutes to explain something that could be also said in a sentence.
Well, the descriptions are great. You really bring it to life.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, so with cognitive security, information warfare, is there any kind of new development or challenge that you're really, excited about or tracking? That's kind of, can you give us some insight into what's on your radar in that space?
Yeah, well, I suppose this has to take me to the work that I'm doing in my business with the
Yeah.
Army right now. So we're working with the Army's Information Advantage Program Office, which is out of Augusta, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
at Fort Eisenhower. It's part of the Army Cyber Center of Excellence and very much connected with Army Cyber, et cetera. Anyway, we're working with them on an information advantage capability that we call cognitive arbitrage, or it's the Orient Cognitive Arbitrage Platform. And so, what excites me is being able to provide to service members a tool which helps them orient. And so, I'm a Marine, and so I think in maneuver warfare and OODA loop, like John Boyd OODA loop terms. And so we named the Orient Cognitive Arbitrage Platform after the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. And so the platform helps service members very quickly orient and gain situational awareness on the changing dynamics of the information environment. And we have scientifically linked changes in complex systems to human cognition. And so, as the environment changes, operators can make inferences about the cognitive states of the participants or the drivers of global systems and use that in order to help gain and maintain information advantage. And so that is what really excites me, and the feedback that we're getting from the community is really positive so far, especially in the way it helps um, practitioners, whether it's information operations, PSYOP,
Mm-hmm.
civil affairs, public affairs, helps influence practitioners, save them time, and engage at moments that are appropriate for their mission. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of thing that's exciting me these days.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear how you're kind of bridging a gap between, what's the physical world and then kind of that information environment or, the digital world. And just kind of how you're able to make that link.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I didn't really explain the arbitrage concept, but if some in your audience might be familiar with the concept of arbitrage in a financial or like an
Mhm.
equities a
Mhm.
trading context, right? High frequency trading uses the arbitrage concept to identify little disparities in price. So the price of corn might be 11 cents a bushel, or however they measure corn in India, but it's 13 cents a bushel in Egypt, right?
Mhm.
And that little delta gives the opportunity to arbitrage and capture that gain, right? And so what the Orient Cognitive Arbitrage Platform does is it identifies changes in human cognition, which, if capitalized on quickly enough, can help the blue team,
Mhm.
gain steady advantage over the ability to project power and pursue blue goals by identifying these changes in gaining and maintaining information advantage. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
It's very cool. Very
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
So John, I know so national security is a topic that, it's all in the news. Some people think we are secure, some people think we aren't secure. I wondered kind of as far as your perspective, what are your top concerns related to our national security, today? What do you worry about? What keeps you up at night? What in that national security realm are you kind of tracking or focused on?
Right. Well, unsurprisingly, as I've been discussing, I am very concerned about the information
Mhm,
problem and uh, s- Western societies, democracies being influenced in
mhm,
ways that are difficult to perceive,
mhm,
but which are happening nevertheless. And so that's like everything that I've been talking about over the
mhm,
last 20 minutes. So that that is a concern, and being able to measure it and uh, counter it
mhm,
in order to either harden societies or make societies more resilient to these kinds of nefarious efforts, I think is a major agenda item. And lots of organizations are working on different aspects of that problem. Um, but it's also one of those problems that has kind of sort of always existed as well. Um,
yeah.
you know, uh, Information is dangerous, you know,
Mhm,
and I don't mean that to sound silly, but information is what fuels culture and is what
yeah.
fuels society. And that's nothing new, all the way back to, the time when, people were first starting to light fires on
Mhm,
the savanna of Africa and, form groups and starting to cohere and cooperate and collaborate. Information is what helps drive people to create and survive, et cetera, all the way through to today. So information has always been the fuel, but it's a dangerous thing in that it can be weaponized. And so
mhm,
I think the weaponization of information has is possible in ways that are new today.
mhm,
One of the things that I bring up on the podcast periodically, and it's also woven into my business
mhm,
efforts as well, is a complexity science concept, or it's called a law. It's called
mhm,
the law of requisite variety. And it was developed by a gentleman named Ross Ashby, who was a contemporary with complexity science pioneers from the mid 1900s, people like von Neumann and
mhm,
Wiener and Claude Shannon, those kinds of people. Ashby was a contemporary with them, right? And so he is an undisputed cybernetics and complexity science like godfather, right?
mhm,
And so he came up with this law of requisite variety, which basically goes something like this: is that systems, in order for a system to survive, and the system could be a single cell organism like an amoeba, it could be a person like an individual person, it could be a plant, it could be a planet, it could be a society. It applies to all systems, but in order for a system to survive, it must be able to grapple with or accommodate the variety of stimuli which are being forced upon the
mhm,
system. So think about a virus, right? In order
mhm,
for you to survive as a person, your body must be able to fend off all of the different viruses and bugs and intrusions that are part of your natural environment. And in order for you to survive, you must be able to fend all of that off. And if you are unable to deal with the variety of stimuli
mhm,
which are contained within your environment, then eventually you're going to die. And it's the same thing for all of those other systems that I was just describing, right? And so the concept of variety is very important when it comes to resilience and survival, right?
mhm,
And so I think today, and by the way, this was one of the concluding points in the discussion that with Paul Bouvard that I
Mhm.
just mentioned a few moments ago. Um, uh, uh, we have, I believe, at least one, maybe more, like new varieties of information
Mhm.
supply,
Mhm.
which is totally messing things up. And Paul describes it very well as a new way of receiving information, which totally bypasses our historical filters
Mhm.
of being able to assess whether or not information is worthy of my decision making. Just totally bypasses it all, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, and I think that that is getting weaponized so
Yeah.
that, it would be like, me picking up a bottle that has like in the old cartoons, like
Mhm.
poison XX,
Yeah.
skull and crossbones, and being like, poison. Let me just drink that right on down. Yum, 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 yum. And just like basically not even recognizing that it's poison, right?
Yeah.
And so this kind of it's a new variety, right? So the law of requisite variety, I think, is something that people should be aware of in their own personal life, especially as it relates to information consumption. Again,
Yeah.
that was a very long, meandering answer to your simple
Yeah.
question, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, John, I love how you described, that information being weaponized, not necessarily a new thing, because in this kind of area, what I hear often is like, oh, well, it's the internet's fault. It's social media's problem.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
if we could just like throw ourselves back into the dark ages, then we're not
Mhm.
going to have this. And, I mean, obviously it's very unrealistic and would not be a positive outcome there. But it's interesting that with discussions on this topic, so many people ascribe they turn technology into the villain. And
Oh, yeah. Mm.
I think your description really shows how it's kind of an ecosystem that we're
Mhm.
operating in, and that information being weaponized, information being dangerous, isn't because we have a Wi-Fi connection. I mean, it
Mhm.
accelerates
Yep.
dissemination and
Yep.
it changes things. But yeah, no, that was just such a great description of how, nothing is really new under the sun on that front.
Yeah.
Just a
Yep.
different mechanism.
Yep, yep. We all have responsibility.
Yeah,
We all have agency. We all have
yeah.
ownership. And I think for people who are alive and living their lives these days, it is important for people to understand these kinds of dynamics. It's just as important as it was thousands of years ago for people to know how to light a fire.
Yeah.
If you didn't know how to start a fire at some point in our history, then you were basically derelict
Yeah.
in your human duties, right? What do
Yeah.
you mean you don't know how to light a fire? What good are you?
Mhm.
You know? Uh, so that is part, I think, of being a aware, engaged human being in
Mhm.
2025 and beyond is
Mhm.
being is having these kinds of personal skill sets in order to be able to properly navigate today's environment.
Yeah. And those went from being elective skills to essential
Yes.
skills for
Yeah,
success.
that's exactly right. Just as lighting a fire once upon a time was like that was essential, right? You had to
Right?
know how to light a fire, you had to know how to skin a deer,
Yes.
you had to know how to, read the winds and say,
Yeah.
and be like, I think it's going to rain in like 2 days. I mean I'm making that up a little bit, but people I'm confident were much more tuned in to their
Mhm.
natural environments and were able to sense things just based upon subtle change, which is more or less lost to us
Yeah.
these days. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that those are not things that are critical for us to be able to live productive lives these days.
Yeah.
There's another quote, and I can send this to you as well, that I love from a philosopher, late 1900s, early 20, no, yeah, late 1800s, early 1900 philosopher. His name was Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead. That's what it is. But he said something like civilization advances according to the number of processes or according to the number of things that basically get baked into infrastructure. Like the more that stuff gets operationalized and blended into the background, so does civilization advance.
Mhm.
So just like people don't know how to start fires anymore, that's
Mhm.
because we have matches and
Mhm.
automatic lighters and burners on the stove and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to know how to do that anymore because it's there for you. That is how civilization is built. And I think of our civilization as this precious golden egg
Mhm.
that is riding on top of all of this know-how and knowledge and hard fought wars and blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this Western Enlightenment
Mhm.
project that we are all the beneficiaries of,
Mhm.
right? And there is so much encoded into our culture and society that is worth fighting for and
Mhm.
worth maintaining. So that's
Yeah.
that's that's how I think about things.
Yeah. So More Cowbell Unlimited is your company. Can you
Yeah,
tell us
yeah.
a little bit or any advice you have for
Uh-huh.
aspiring entrepreneurs or veterans interested in starting their own business?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I've got a sense of humor. For those who are not familiar, the More Cowbell is a reference to a Saturday Night Live skit with Will Ferrell and
Yes.
Christopher Walken. If you've never seen the skit, go onto YouTube and Google More Cowbell, and it's a real hoot, right? And so, as I said, I like to have a good time. I've got a sense of humor while doing earnest work. So More Cowbell has nothing to do with the business that I have. People ask me, it's like, what? How does that relate to complex systems and information? It doesn't. Okay, it doesn't. But the advice that I have for people who are thinking that they might have an entrepreneurial streak in them is uh, uh, talk to other people who have done
Mhm.
it. Talk to other small business owners. Talk to others who have worked in small businesses
Mhm.
because there's oh yeah, and if you're a lazy person and you think that starting your own business, you'll just be kicking back and other people will be doing work on your behalf, think again, especially in the early stages, right?
Mhm.
But if you've got a vision and an entrepreneurial, innovative streak in you, I say go for it. You only live once. Take a big swing. Take a big
Mhm.
swing at life and go for it. But if you have the opportunity, work in another small business,
Mhm.
like, try to work in a tech startup,
Mhm.
as a project manager or as, some other, uh, uh, role in the tech startup, do that beforehand. Um, if you're really good at thinking 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 steps ahead, try to plan your career in a way so that what you're doing along the way complements
Mhm.
what you wind up doing in your business. One of the things that I found in starting my business is that when I was in the Marines, I didn't do anything that was related to information operations. And so one of the challenges I had was to figure out how can I become recognized as someone who has something to contribute to this problem space.
Mhm.
And so if 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 you do that on the way from your schooling to your early career, all the way to starting a business, if you can think ahead, I want to do this someday, so I'm gonna get this experience here. I'm gonna do this here. I'm gonna find out a little bit more about this here. And then by the time you start your business, you'll already have a track record of domain expertise, so that when you start your business, you'll already have a Rolodex of relationships,
Mhm.
and you'll know what the market is, where the market is, where the market is going, and how your technology solves a problem. That would be to your benefit.
And that's excellent advice, John. Well, thank you so much for coming on Tipping Spears and sharing your insights and your experiences.
Yeah, well, again, Hannah, I really appreciate you inviting me on. I don't often get to share my story like that, so it's
Aw.
a real pleasure to do so with you and your audience. I, Genuinely, I'm serious about that.
That's great. No, I loved hearing, I loved seeing the journey. You're one of the people I think about when I think of just multi-talented, so many different areas of expertise, so many different sectors. It was so neat to kind of hear how you use that in every different role and every
Yep.
different, initiative. So,
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you again.
and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about our future. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.